Welcome back to the Ink Sink. I am Annie.
I'm Kaylee.
This is the publishing podcast for the rest of us, where we talk about social media, representation, and old people just wondering what the heck these kids are doing these days.
Which is odd considering most of the kids in question are definitely 30 or older.
I know.
Guys.
It was like young people, 35 and below. And I was like, are we young? This is the only time I get called young. Thank you so much.
I'll slip you that crisp 5 later. All right.
Thank you so much, Reuters. So we're talking about a lot of stuff today. Actually, we haven't met up in a while. So we released these episodes a little bit out of order, and you might have gotten a lot of news from us recently. We actually haven't recorded recently. We haven't seen each other in like a month.
It's absurd. Well, holidays,
It's been a while. So hey, Kaylee, how you doing?
Hey, girl,
I miss you.
Up? Oh my god, I did miss our weekly gossip sessions, but I don't think they count as gossip. It's just us like bitching about the news being terrible or being great sometimes, which is
sometimes
awesome.
The news is great. Yeah, we do have a fair amount of good news this week. I was thinking, what can we do for people who ever decide to be our subscribers? And I was like, you know what we shoshould do is just make a Discord and post our bloopers just for those people so that they can hear us.
Or we should have like a Discord.
Clinking glasses.
Right. We should have a Discord.
Oh, we should. I don't know who would join it though.
I don't either.
I mean, Abby would just because she loves us. First of all, today's
wonderful.
Episode brought to you by Abby. And
God.
I don't think anyone else likes us enough to... I think we have 9 friends, and they are indulging us by listening to us giggle at each other.
While they're showering, whatever they're doing in the background, they just I'll play this while. Give them
If you are listening to this in the shower, don't forget to scrub your legs. I know that's a thing that people think they don't need to scrub their legs. You aren't on Twitter, but I am, and it's a thing where people just don't seem to think that they need to scrub their legs.
Girl.
I know.
I mean, even if you
I know.
Exfoliate sometimes. Jesus, you snakes.
I know.
Peel that layer off.
I know.
Okay.
It's we are in well-trod territory here. And every couple months someone is like, hey, remember that time on Twitter when a bunch of people said they don't wash their legs? And then a bunch of people will reply to that and be like, I still don't wash my legs. And it's like, why are you saying this out loud in a public forum?
The internet is forever, you guys.
Number 1, wash your legs. Number 2, if you don't tell anyone. Just keep that shit to yourself and wear pants. Don't let anyone take them off ever.
If you're in a context where someone's like, isn't it weird how this thing is happening? And you're like, I do the thing. You don't have to say that.
You could be quiet.
Nobody is forcing you.
Keep it to yourself and you'll feel better about everything, I think. People are the worst.
It's not to be fair, oversharing is something I do struggle with, but I feel like I've gotten so much better. I pick up on the context very quickly when I'm like, oh no, I probably shouldn't have said that, and I won't share that general vein of things in the future.
But also, if you haven't ever met Kaylee in person before, I'm just going to go ahead and vouch. She's a hygienic person.
Oh, yes, I do bathe regularly.
I'm pretty sure
I hit all the bases. All the bases. Just to be clear, this is more personal and emotional stuff. Physically, I am a very clean person.
Yeah, no, emotionally a mess. Disgusting.
Oh, yeah.
She smells horrible, but physically great. So good.
Rancid
Smells like
vibes.
flowers.
Physically perfumed.
Spiritual air quotes. Perfect. Done. Awesome. We can move on to the news now. So, Kaylee, you got into a little bit of a kerfuffle after you said that you don't go on Facebook last episode.
My monthly login to Facebook, I managed to catch.
You managed to get in deep, deep trouble with... I do want to be clear, this is a joke. Our dear friend Mike is a lovely man, but he posted something and he said, I have some feedback for you guys. I have a correction. It was for our tropes episode.
It was.
Where you had talked about the Chosen One trope and specifically called out... Frodo. And what did Mike say to that?
He said, actually.
Actually.
And if you haven't, this is also a plug, and we are not paid, but if they want to pay us, that's fine. But Actually is a very funny show. With a lot of similar things that happen.
It's college humor, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, they're great.
Or it's I don't know actually who puts on. Alex watches it, so I get the episodes, but I never the channel.
If it's not college humor, it's definitely some college humor alums.
Brennan, whatever his name is, the very charismatic.
Yes, the internet's boyfriend.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's absolutely.
Yeah. Correct. Anyway, go ahead.
Mike wanted to dispute my choice of Frodo as the Chosen One because Aragorn ticks every single box as far as the traditional trope goes. He has the prophecy, he's got this, the item, he's got the legacy, and certainly the story arc in the book support, in the books, sorry, the support him as a chosen one. However, the trope itself is expanded from the traditional, like, tick all the boxes classic chosen one hero or protagonist into, you know, a little more of a gray area. And when do you have the person that's like, you've got your everyman, you've got the unchosen one who becomes the chosen one just because there isn't anyone else, and you've got the masses of chosen many that stand up and rise up together. Like, those are more interesting for me, personally. Like, I'll write fan fiction about Aragorn, but it wasn't interesting to talk about. Like, I need a lot more time to expand and make this interesting.
We don't have to say that there's only one chosen one in any individual story either.
The narrative supports, especially depending on how it's woven, since they had their own narratives in the books.
For sure, yes.
Like, they came together. Who doesn't love their faves coming together and then, like, supporting each other, but then, like, they're bros, but then also, like, doing their own thing, but still being bros? The people that you love, like, in different ways, like, oh my god, they like know each other and they like each other too. Like, it just feels good.
There is a reason I think that the "my friends, you bow to no one" line resonates so hard with everyone, because it's two chosen ones doing eye to eye and being like, you know what, bro? You are awesome. No, bro, you are awesome.
It's so good. Anyway, so Mike, total respect. You're not wrong, but also I feel like I also wasn't wrong.
No, I definitely feel that that's the case. Yes,
we can both be right.
Yeah, and it's our podcast, so you know.
That's right. We love you, Mike.
Yeah, we do. Actually, I think I put this into the show notes that I sent to you. Mike sent us another message.
Did he? I missed that. Actually, was it in here? I missed that.
I actually just realized that I did not put his name on the message, so you might have just gotten the message and been like, oh, I wonder who put this in there. It was Mike. So Mike also DM'd me instead of publicly calling me out on
your own Facebook.
He chose to actually just message me.
I'm so glad he felt comfortable specifically adding me.
Calling you out publicly on a public post.
On somebody else's Facebook. Thanks.
Oh, Mike.
No, that's actually pretty great, honestly.
All right, so I'm going to read this feedback that we got from our dear friend Mike. Hi, Annie. I'm catching up on the ink sync, and while I am very late on this, and bored on an overnight shift, I figured I'd weigh in on the Dungeon Master versus Game Master debate. Probably the simplest reason is that TSR and then Wizards of the Coast, and these are the people who own Dungeons & Dragons, TSR and Wizards of the Coast actually own the trademark for the term Dungeon Master. So a lot of other games use the term Game Master, which I imagine is generic enough that it can't really be trademarked in this fashion. There are folks that have trademarked the term Game Master as it applies to things like software and sports gear, though. So I looked this up, and it is accurate. Wizards of the Coast does own a trademark for the term Dungeon Master, but it also reminded me of another thing that my husband was describing to me, the history of Dungeons & Dragons, because I have played, but I'm not, like, all the way into the lore and everything. Apparently, between, I think, Dungeons & Dragons 2 and Dungeons & Dragons 4, I'm not quite sure where it came in, but when we were young, Pathfinder showed up. Mm-hmm. I believe Pathfinder specifically uses Game Master, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that would make sense, especially if the other major titan in the arena uses Dungeon Master. Because I would say, like, they're probably, like, Wizards of the Coast isn't gonna, like, punch down on, like, mom and pop shops running their own little, like, pay $5 when you use our table and hopefully you'll buy a book or something, like, but they probably would have said something for... Yeah, Paizo.
Yeah, and we talked about how...
Paizo is the Pathfinder publisher, sorry.
And we also talked about how, like, streamers were probably even more aware of the... Well, we talked about how the difference in with streamers, because streamers are probably playing more games. Yeah. But also, you know, streamers are way more likely to get cease and desist orders than anyone else is.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And if you want to talk to us, you absolutely can.
Oh, please. I'm not just can, but we encourage, request.
Absolutely. Please do. You can message us on Anchor, on Twitter, or if you want to argue with Kaylee in the comments,
feel free to at me.
Please do.
I mean, it might be a little bit before I see that, but I will respond. I'm just, look, it's not that I'm against social media. I just don't care.
There you go, Kaylee. That's probably the best way to look at it, actually. It's probably the healthiest way to live.
That's what I got, fam.
And if you would like to be a supporter, like our dear friend Abby, shout out to Abby.
Abby!
You can support us through Spotify and Anchor. There are levels. You can do 99 cents. $1.99, $9.99. You could do more if you really wanted to. I don't know why you would, but you are also the people who wanted us to go weekly, so you know what?
They want us, Amy.
They don't want us. I don't know. People, get out of the shower and just message us about how you wash your legs, please.
Please don't. No, only Annie. Please, only Annie. Like, that's not, look, I will respond to most other things, but I probably will just be like, and move on.
Here's
from
what
that.
I want. I want Kaylee to make us a Tumblr, and then I want her to get, like, images of just people being like, look, I washed my legs. This is my dream.
You know what? I did lie. I will say that I don't get on any other social media, but I am constantly on Tumblr.
There you
and that
go.
says a lot about me as a person, because that is the wild, wild west of non-targeted, non-specific,
oh my god,
random chaos.
And you are actually like an OG Tumblr user. Like, you stayed
like
on it through the generations. I only recently
went
went back.
An anniversary email from Tumblr.
I only recently went.
One.
I'm one of the horrible people who went back after the Destiel canon and like had like a whole reminiscence when I went back, and it was lovely, and it's still lovely. It's still great, and I do like my dumb fashion posts.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about. This is a spoiler for next episode. We're gonna tease this a little bit later. We are just hardcore teasing next week. The episode that you guys are getting is probably, we haven't even recorded it yet, but we're already in love with it. We've done all the research, and we're like really fucking hyped to record it. So forgive us.
We actually don't require forgiveness. We're really pumped.
We're super cool. Anyway. Moving on, Kaylee, we have to get into something a little bit depressing. We have not recorded since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. So we do have to talk about it a little bit. It is current events, and it doesn't necessarily pertain to books, but in that the free sharing of information is part of publishing. We do have to talk about that. And also, we want to talk about our community. So Kaylee and I on this show are obviously very pro women's reproductive health.
100%.
And more specifically on principle, pro women's privacy. The bottom line is that you know what's best for your body.
And nobody else should have a say.
And it's not even about gender. You as a human know what's best for your body. Man, woman, human, alien, whoever you are, whatever you are, you have the right to make choices about your own body.
Your body. 100%. We cannot, we will try to be clearer if it's at all physically possible, but I think Annie nailed it.
And we are very lucky to be covering an industry that is majority female. And we have talked about this before. The Independent Booksellers Association is actually run by a woman. And she put out a statement on Instagram saying that her bookstore would be supporting abortion resources for women in need and through the mail. We will put all of those links to all of those charities in the show notes. We don't have to go. We literally don't have time to go into all of them, which is a heartening thing in itself because
there are a lot of them, which is thank goodness. Like, you guys,
absolutely.
Like, this is, again, the majority of the country supports the right to choose. I just want to be clear. The fact that we have a minority that has power and a very vocal minority that's just shitting on the rest of us is very disheartening. 100%. Agreed. But the fact of the matter is, like, it's always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and we're still making progress. So the fact that we've had this happen is absolutely upsetting, and you're totally, totally valid if you feel bad and mad and sad and you're physically like ill sometimes about it, but keep fighting the good fight. Take your time, do what you need to do for your own mental health.
Absolutely.
And then everybody is going to keep on the fight for sure.
And of course, as we talked about, the free access of information and making sure that people get all the information we need means that publishers as an industry are also grappling with this. There have been, I don't know what to call them. They're just kits of books. They're boxing up books that are related to abortion, related to women's rights, and printing those.
Yeah, and have been critical over the years.
Absolutely. Sure. I think it's very telling that the new handbook for a post-Roe America are seeing a surge in popularity, and publishers are anticipating extra printings. We've talked before about how the printing crisis in publishing is going right now. They are stopping printing of other books in order to make sure that women are able to access the information. So
I also thought it was very smart smart that when the initial leak occurred on the ruling, that they immediately
started.
They switched.
Yeah.
And, they hard right shifted and got all of these materials ready and are doing second and third runs of this new print run.
And I wish that there were more that we could do. Obviously, as just a random niche podcast, we have nothing but awareness to give you guys. But please, if you have dollars, please give them to any of these organizations that are supporting women's rights to privacy and healthcare. Moving on from that mildly / majorly depressing story, we are going into actually something that has set the news world ablaze. We're talking about digital and newspaper publishing. Now, Kaylee, do you want to intro this for us?
God, there was so much.
There was so much there.
This whole thing has this week we got a lot. You guys,
got a lot.
Actually, it's been a lot of stuff. Okay. Yeah, so there was a digital news report that actually was reviewing the survey that they conducted. It was 93,000 consumers that were surveyed online.
Yeah, why don't I read this quote?
This
comes from What's New in Publishing, and they reviewed the key takeaways. And they said, the Digital News Report for 2022, the DNR, brings together key insights from a survey of more than 93,000.
Okay, I was remembering.
Online news consumers across 46 countries. The key themes in the 164-page report include growing news avoidance, which caused quite a stir.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, actually.
Mm-hmm. And as well as lower levels of trust in the media. And according to What's New in Publishing, the big headline from this year's DNR is that about 38% of people globally say that they often or sometimes avoid the news. Rates of news avoidance vary by country, but the US and the UK exhibit some of the highest rates. 42% of people now avoid the news in the US and 46% in the UK.
I had a lot of thoughts.
I had many thoughts as well.
Yeah.
You can go first.
All right. So one of the interesting things about the article was also the I can't remember, actually. There were several articles, so maybe I'm getting confused.
No, I sent so for the record, I sent Kaylee 3 sources covering 6 or 7 key points. These sources were What's New in Publishing had 2 articles summarizing the takeaways, and then Neiman Lab, which is a journalist and news resource newsletter, also covered it. So we will put all of those links in the show notes, but Kaylee is going to be kind of combining some of this information.
Take everything in and start thinking about things critically. We always recommend critical thought, just to be clear. Think about, and if you
rule.
Yeah. If you disagree or you just want to discuss anything that we've said, please, again, reach out to us.
Absolutely.
Talk to us, please.
We want to have these conversations. That's why we started this podcast.
Yes. Okay, so my thought here was just, it's so interesting because we are also the UK, the US, and other major powers. We have, nominally, you have free access to the news in ways that, maybe some other countries don't. And the fact that we're inundated is the issue. And that was something that we had talked about in one of our most recent episodes with the war in Ukraine, and that people are getting numb to it. I mean, it's accurate. It's constant. Oh, here's another depressing thing that's happening about my rights being stripped or whatever. And, you just stop being able to process because you have to live in the world. You have to live. You have to be able to move forward. And so you become numb to just to the shock, which it should be, and you stop taking it in, and you stop, you feel bad because you're not responding, and then you stop reading it. That's just where we're at. The other interesting thing that I thought was kind of oddly specific was the definition of news for quote-unquote young people, which is us, and
I do want to be clear. So this report was done by Reuters, and
this is the one. This is the thing.
They said young people, the under 35s. And Kaylee and I both were like, oh, okay.
I like it.
Nice. Awesome.
Right.
Cool. Wow.
Okay.
So they said that young people had redefined, not in a general way, but to themselves, when they say news, they actually think of 2 different definitions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was just interesting. So you've got news, which is the traditional definition, and that focuses slightly more on maybe politics and science and crime, etc., versus interest pieces and things that are maybe not as constantly depressing.
I was thinking of it as capital N news, like what's going on in Washington, horrible bad news about the weather, and then lowercase n news, like what's going on in publishing.
Or that's fair. What's going on in publishing? Have we made any strides in medical technology lately?
Yeah.
Like stuff that's not necessarily totally fluff, but that is not designed to emotionally flog you.
Yeah, it's new. It's happening, but it's not capital N news, which I thought was really fascinating because I had not seen that ever put into words, but I genuinely do feel that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. I'll get the big stuff, but like for the most part, my news feed on my phone is targeted to new books, stuff that's interesting in comics, or cool things that young people are doing, like in the world, like with research grants and stuff, or art. Or even some entertainment pieces, oddly somehow, which I just don't know quite how I got there, but whatever. Absolutely. I'm so much likelier to hit some of that during the day, and then I'll like brace myself and take a shot, and then I'll start looking at, all right, what happened in Washington? What's going on in Beijing? What did they do in London?
There is a level of capital N news that is fucking depressing. I thought that was really fascinating, and I believe that one specifically came from Neiman Lab, and I think that they're calling this a younger people thing, but I think older people also feel this way, that, there's a difference between the news you consume because you have to and the news you consume because you want to. And a lot of times the news we consume because we want to are being given to us by an algorithm, because the algorithm is the thing that's figuring out what we want. Meanwhile, the capital N news is just, okay, this is capital I important and it does need to be told, but it's not being presented to us in a way that we want to consume it. And yeah, on some level, of course, nobody wants to consume bad news. Like, nobody sought out Shinzo Abe's assassination. Nobody got excited to like bring that to the masses. Meanwhile, like, we get excited to bring our podcast to the masses. But I think that we're going to see a break between those news sources. I think that we're already sort of seeing it, and we're already sort of seeing the struggle between reconciling those two things with BuzzFeed News.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's probably part of why BuzzFeed News has been struggling so much. I think that right now, those two news sources are so separated that we're not going to see them recombine in the way that they used to be. Like, it used to be you'd have an entertainment section at the back of the newspaper. I don't think we're ever really going to see that again. I think that we're either going to see totally separate news sources or something new altogether. I don't know what it's going to be.
And then I think, just generally speaking, I just want to chime in. I think that, as we have said before regarding news as business, I think that's really impacting some of the other numbers in this report that we were initially coming around on this discussion on, which is the trust in the news.
Yes.
Historically low. I think, correct my figures, please, but I think in the US it's 22 or 23% of people that responded.
Yeah, 26%. Yeah.
26%.
And it had fallen from the year before.
That's it. Okay. So 26% of people that responded to this survey in the US specifically trusted the news sources. We have very clearly biased news sources, but then they're not allowed to admit their biases. So they're presenting news as fact when it's clearly informed by opinion. And we know the news agencies in question, and this is part of the issues that the news industry is grappling with for younger people, 35s and under.
Us babies.
Yeah, right. Which is that they're not connecting to brands. Yeah, because your brands are kind of trash. For the most part, sorry, but it's true. You guys have these tentatively or mouth service objective standards. You don't believe that. Like, you have one or two people that genuinely, passionately believe that, and you shit all over them. So the fact of the matter is, I mean, we all know that's why the numbers are the way they are, and they're just like, oh no, what can we do? I don't know. Be less shitty.
So again, this report was like, how many pages long?
It's so long, you guys. Like, we actually had to delay recording because I had to read so much specifically for this report.
Yeah, we're talking about two key points of this thing, and I think those are the two most important key points. But please go read it. We're gonna link to everything. But
it was very interesting.
One of the things that really stood out to me personally was under 35s still largely say that they prefer to mostly read the news rather than mostly watch the news. Some seek out a mix of formats to better understand the information, while others are drawn to audio-based formats like podcasts that allow users to multitask while they listen. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach or medium through which a newsroom can attract younger audiences. I don't have a solution to any of this. I wish that there were like some, little bow that we could tie at the end of this and be like, oh, people just don't understand. And yeah, they don't. But also, like, we don't understand either because we're just following the dopamine. We don't have specific data and facts on why we're doing what we're doing either.
Not at all. I mean, and
us youngsters.
Like, right. A lot of this stuff is like trend analysis that's occurred over the last 200 years.
Right.
Because
so it's looking backwards necessarily. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so like this is all like considering the rate of innovation and technology. We just don't have that time period to look back on. This is groundblazing. And like if you consider the fact that late 1800s, early 1900s, that's where they were. Right. And we had a lot of innovation at the time. That's why like journalistic standards came about, is because people were like, let's do whatever the fuck we want. And other people were like, this is shit.
And there's a lot of hand-wringing about people getting their news from social media, but no one's really getting their news from, they're getting their news from a news source that's being shared on social media. It's still from the news source.
Discussed. Like, you guys, it's not a matter of, it's just, these are the facts and these are how I think about them. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I would not necessarily have thought about them that way. Here's what I'm thinking, but also now it's informed by the people that I trust. And again, the people that are doing this hand-wringing, you did the same thing. Like, just like it's so weird. Like, it's so odd to me. But like, it's not like new.
There was a Twitter thread, and I'll see if I can find it. But it was like, there is nothing new under the sun, and it showed in like, I don't know, last year or so. It was like Gen Z, the next generation, doesn't want to work, and then it was like 10, 20 years before, Gen X, the next generation, doesn't want to work, and then it was like 1960 or whatever, Boomers, next generation, doesn't want to work, and it's like, okay,
it's absolutely no. And I've definitely, every time this argument comes up in my family, I'm just like, no, there's genuinely nothing new about this. Like,
nothing
you guys
new under the sun.
Have 100%. Every generation is exactly the same. And these arguments come up. They're like, well, no. And I'm like, yeah, I can actually pull up the articles and like the screen, like not screen, but like the scanned in newspapers of like the newfangled like magazines that were coming out, and like how kids are not reading newspapers or going to read books or working or whatever. Like, it's so stupid. Like, and it's so consistent, and people are just like, no, now ours is the most righteous newest outrage or whatever. And like, no, it's not. Just sit down, take a breath, have some tea. It's like low caffeine, chamomile green.
Like, watch some House Hunters. You'll be okay.
Right, HGTV, you guys.
We're gonna move on to our favorite news section. Kaylee, I had a late addition to this. I don't know if you refreshed the notes that I sent you, but there was a Twitter announcement.
Was it the Jamila?
Yes.
Yes. I was very excited to hear that. And I think that it's what a timely kind of move. And I know this was just a Twitter thread, but I looked her up just to understand more about her. And like, so Jamila King is now going to be the new managing editor at BuzzFeed News. So Jamila King is a Brooklyn-based writer, and she's actually the current race and justice reporter at Mother Jones.
Incredible.
And she's moving now to become the editor at BuzzFeed News.
So I've worked at a couple news organizations in my time, and I can tell you that each one has been organized vastly differently. So managing editor means something totally different depending on whatever news organization you're going to, but all of them are given tons of responsibility over authors and other editors. It is not an easy job, no matter what your structure is. So congrats to Jamila King. And obviously, like, just reading her bio, I am so excited to see what direction she takes the newsroom in.
And I really hope that, I know that because we have been talking about like the shift that BuzzFeed News is making, because they downsized. I mean, they cut their kind of whole staff in half or worse. So they really do need to have a targeted approach.
And it seems like she's incredibly focused.
Exactly. So that's why I'm like very excited. I super agree with you. Like,
people like to get on us youths for not being focused, but I mean, if you just look at her resume, I mean, it's just focus after focus after focus. Yes. So congrats to her.
Absolutely. 100%. Super looking forward to everything that you're doing. And we also got news that the Chicago Sun-Times has a new executive editor, and that would be Miss Jennifer Coe. Like, congrats. I'm so excited. Also, awesome. Like, her headshot's so cute. What? She looks so excited and happy to be there and energetic, and I'm just really pumped for her. Apparently she's their first woman and person of color that's going to be there.
Incredible. Weight on her shoulders. I'm sure that it feels like a lot of pressure, but I hope that she stops and takes a second and is like, fuck yeah.
she's,
Go
I mean,
me.
like, that's awesome for her. Absolutely,
Yes,
100%.
congratulations. And now for our favorite section. Kaylee, what are you reading?
Girl, so you know I like me some T. Kingfisher. You know she's one of my favorite authors.
I actually just finished a T. Kingfisher book that you gave me. It was so good.
I'm so excited. I'm so glad. We were talking about this. I had found T. Kingfisher through one of my Amazon dives. So I was excited to be able to loan Annie a copy of one of the books that I read recently by T. Kingfisher, which is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, which I had mentioned before on the show.
Out of curiosity, does it have sequels?
Not yet.
Oh.
A lot of her stuff is one-shots. She
yes,
writes,
but they set that up for a sequel.
She does that. She absolutely. So the book
mean.
that I'm currently, or that I just finished.
I literally finished that and I was like, I want her to be BFFs. Spoilers. I want her to be BFFs with the Golden General, and I want them to like have like wizard conversations and like bake together.
I think it's absolutely 100% where she was going with that, and I like super support that. Like
Anyway.
I would write that fan fiction.
Oh,
girl,
I bet it's out there. Probably not like
no.
It's kind of niche.
Well,
niche.
No. Also, consider this: like her writing's really good, and that's the issue with fandom, or the like benefit, whatever, of fandom is that if the content of the media is good and doesn't leave a lot of plot holes, I have found that it's pretty small fandom-wise.
Interesting.
Because people aren't left like super frustrated and like screaming into the void about what they want. We should do an
episode on that, like what properties inspire fandom and what don't, because it's not fiction versus non, because RPF exists.
Girl, it sure does.
We should dig into that, because fan studies are a real thing now.
There
aren't a lot of journals, but they're coming up.
Topic. Like it's a very interesting topic. I super support. I would be down, and we should totally.
I'm gonna put that on my list.
Good.
Keep talking.
So A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking is the one that Annie just read, and she may or may not be talking about. The book I just finished is called Sword Heart, and so I actually I just love the premise, which was the author, and T. Kingfisher is her pen name for this particular series, which is more adult targeted novels rather than her children's novels. It's Ursula something, I can't remember. So her inspiration for this was, you've got the sentient weapon, the sentient sword that's just immortal and can't die or whatever, and has to deal with all this line of wielders, and not all of them are going to be gems, guys. Like some of them are going to be real schmucks, and so like what must that be like? And so it's an action dramedy romance. I loved it so much. I was not expecting it to be a romance, because most of the books that I've read of hers have been more targeted, like the main characters have been children, but the main character in this one is an adult woman, a widow of 12 years. Yeah, I love her so much. I love her writing. I love her characters. I love her approach to the world. It's just so good, you guys. I cannot express enough how much I enjoy her work. So you've got the main character's a widow. She's probably in her 30s. Late 20s at the youngest, and essentially it's like set in modern-ish fantasy times, if that makes any sense. Maybe like early 1800s style, but like a little bit more fantasy-esque, because there's magic and stuff, and you've got like random wandering fairy hills and stuff that they end up getting a visit to. And it's set in the same world as one of the other books. Gosh, I need to start rereading again. The Clockwork Boys, which is another one of her books that I'm really pumped to read. So the main character, she is taken in after her husband dies. She's just taken in by the great uncle of the family, who's the only non-shitbag in this family, basically. So the family's not great. So the great uncle dies and leaves her all of his money, because she was the one that actually gave a shit about him, and was caring for him in his elderly years, and just genuinely was interesting and as a person, and not just a miserable...
Like Knives Out style.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And they're like, well, you're gonna marry your cousin. And she's like, well, he's awful, and also I don't want to. And they're like, we're gonna lock you up until you see sense, basically. And so she's like, well, shit. And they put her in her room and lock the door.
Was not expecting this to be an attic wife story.
Yeah, well, they tried. And she was like, well, what if I just spoil...
I mean, it never works. The attic wife always comes down and sets fire to stuff.
It doesn't work. In this case, it's more metaphorical. So she finds the sword and draws it for reasons. And out pops a man. And he's like, I'm ready. Because he's the servant of the sword. He's the sword. He's the sentient sword. And he's like, I'm ready to fucking fight. And she's like, oh, well, And he's like, why are you half naked? And she's like, don't worry about that. And puts her clothes back on.
Why is she half naked?
So trigger warning. It's a black comedy a little bit in parts. So she, doesn't want to marry her hideous, awful cousin. And like she has nieces. And she's like, well, if I die before we get married. So she's ready to just...
Oh my god.
And he's like, don't use my sword to kill yourself. And
he's like, rude.
And also, put your shirt on, ma'am. And she's like, I don't want to die, but also I don't want to marry Alvin. His name is Alvin.
Yeah, I mean,
what an Alvin. Anyway, the aunt is like, let's go. And he's like, oh, they're holding you hostage. Like, it finally comes to play. Like, he thought, like, one of her, she's like, I mean, I have, like, a 13-year-old niece who's, like, who would probably be willing to come rescue me, but she's 13 and also across the world. And he's like, oh, wait, you're being held hostage? She's like, yeah.
What about the everything gave it away?
I don't... And he's like, okay, it's because he's from a totally different culture, too. Like, it was more of a sort of a pseudo
fish out of water
Viking sort of deal. Yeah, like, it had been, like, 500 years since, like, he had been sealed in the sword. So... he's like, okay, I'm on the same page, and just fucking kicks down the door. And, like, has this fight with the bodyguard, lops off a limb.
He's got the spirit.
He's ready to go. He was like, okay, I got it now. I know what we're doing. And, like, they get out, and then she's like, okay, well, we need to figure this out. So they go into the city to get a lawyer, basically, essentially, from this other,
a magic lawyer?
A religious order.
A wizard lawyer.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, I love it so much. So the lawyer is non-binary. So they go by they, them in the book the whole time. I love all of the characters so much. Like, I want the three of them to just, like, be a throuple by the end of it. Like, I know it's not going to happen, but, like, I totally ship it. It's definitely, like, so the main two, so the woman and the sword, totally get together by the end, which, you see coming right away.
Of course.
But, it's
He's
so
like,
funny.
ma'am, put your boobs away.
He's like, you have he's, like, thinking to himself, my goodness, those are impressive, but, like the whole
we
time.
We just met! Exactly. Buy me dinner first!
Basically. He's like, I'm usually drawn for a fight, so let's cover this up, and we can come back to this later. So anyway, I was literally reading this on the beach, and I was...
It sounds like a good beach read.
Yeah. I was absolutely, like, hacking up laughter, like, the whole time. Like, I'm sure people around me were not happy, but I did. Anyway,
oh, for sure. Why would they come to the beach if they didn't want to hear people laughing?
Exactly. I agree.
People having a good time. Those jerks.
So, that was what I'm reading. And I super recommend it, and I'm going to bring it over next time and lend it to you.
Is it... You finished it?
I did.
Oh, good.
Yes, I just finished it.
Does it have a good ending?
Yeah. Good. It does, again, leaves it open for a sequel, of course, but they are together, and we don't have 17 trailing threads to deal with, so anyway, I think you'll enjoy it, and I think you would probably also laugh.
I would love to read it.
Okay. What are you reading, Annie?
I am reading a book called What Editors Do, which is about, wait for it, what editors do.
My God.
It's So for those of you who are maybe new to the podcast, I am an editor by trade. I work usually with financial newsletters, but I don't do any kind of book editing or acquisitions editing. I am not a buyer. I'm dealing with content that has already come into my sphere. I am not acquiring content or dealing with markets or books. So this book is mostly essays of like 5 or 6 pages each from established book editors.
That's interesting.
There's also an essay from Carol Fisher-Saller, who is a very famous copy editor. It's really absolutely fascinating, and I find this is true across jobs where you find different pockets of the same industry.
Sure.
And it's basically the same thing, but it feels different to an outsider. Like, they're describing their jobs, and that's more or less what I do. Like, they're talking about monitoring the market, monitoring what people are buying, what people are reading, what people want to read, what people want more of. And I do that too. I mean, I have to tailor my publications to what people want to read. Otherwise, no one's going to read them, and there's no point in me editing them.
Go figure.
So they're doing it on kind of for a different purpose with a different focus, but we are doing the same thing.
Sure.
And I found it really fascinating. It's also going into different types of publishing houses, from trade publishing houses, which do like books that you see on the bestseller list, to scholarly publishing houses, which are publishing these books from university presses, which are usually nonfiction, but their audiences are huge, from students to teachers to experts in the field wanting to learn more. I'm a nerd like this. I like to read about my own industry, but I always find it wonderful to read things like this because it helps remind me what I'm doing, how I'm doing it by recontextualizing it. It's a very nerdy book.
No, it sounds awesome. No, it sounds like right up your alley. Like
It is. I love it.
It's outsider POV RPF, Annie.
It is. My coffee shop AU RPF. Anyway.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Do you have a Kaylee coda for us this week?
Oh yeah, look, we are all in this together. I know that it frequently feels very disheartening, but we're approaching this fight from many different avenues, and you're not standing alone. So we'll do our part with this podcast, with our donations, with our privilege wherever we can, and so you're not standing alone.
Thanks for listening to The Ink Sink. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Bookshop, and you can DM us on pretty much any of those except for Bookshop. I mean, if you find a way to DM us on Bookshop, I guess let us know. That'd be kind of cool. And of course, this podcast is brought to you by our supporters. You can support us on Spotify and on Anchor. I believe our tips are open on Twitter as well. I'm not sure.
Thanks, Abby.
Thanks, Abby. You usually say bye.
Oh, bye!
I'm sorry.
I felt like it didn't need me that time.